Sarah Chun adjusted the collar of her regulation uniform as she stepped into the vast training hall of the Galactic Military Academy on Kepler Station. The artificial gravity felt lighter than Earth's crushing pull, making each step feel like she was bouncing slightly. Around her, cadets from dozens of species chatted in their native tongues, creating a symphony of clicks, whistles, and harmonics that would have driven a human translator insane. She was the only human in a class of 200 beings. The Valkyrie cadets towered above everyone else, their crystalline skin refracting the overhead lights into prismatic rainbows. Their movements were precise and calculated, like living geometric equations. Near the equipment racks, a group of Zephyrian cadets floated inches above the ground, their gossamer wings creating gentle breezes that carried the scent of their homeworld's exotic flowers. In the corner, the Thraken cadets practiced formation drills. Their thick, armored hides could stop plasma bolts, and their natural strength let them lift equipment that required anti-gravity assists for most other species. Even the smallest Thraken cadet could probably break Sarah's spine with one hand. Sarah had read their files during the journey to Kepler Station. Every species here came from worlds that seemed like paradise compared to Earth. Controlled climates, abundant resources, stable ecosystems, and predictable weather patterns. Their homeworlds were gardens where evolution had been gentle, creating beings of beauty and specialized excellence. Earth was different. Earth was a nightmare planet where everything tried to kill you every single day. Attention, cadets. The voice boomed across the training hall in perfect galactic standard. Drill Sergeant Vextar stepped onto the raised platform, his 4 arms gesturing for silence. The Mordhack's exoskeleton gleamed under the lights, each plate perfectly maintained and polished. His compound eyes could track movement from every angle simultaneously, and his mandibles clicked with authority. Today we begin your first combat simulation. You will face basic threat scenarios designed to test your reaction times, tactical thinking, and unit cohesion. His gaze swept across the assembled cadets before stopping on Sarah. Some of you come from species with natural advantages in combat. Others, his mandibles clicked disapprovingly. Others come from soft worlds where conflict has been eliminated for millennia. Sarah felt the weight of dozens of eyes focusing on her. She kept her expression neutral, but her muscles tensed automatically. On Earth, being singled out by a predator meant one thing: prepare to fight or die. Cadet Zlixander, a Valkyrie with particularly sharp crystal formations along his arms, whispered something to his squad mates that caused ripples of crystalline laughter. Sarah caught the words fragile and primitive in galactic standard. The simulation will present you with hostile contacts, Sergeant Vextar continued. Your job is to neutralize the threats using appropriate force levels. Remember, cadets, this is training. We expect measured responses proportional to the threat level. This is not your primitive homeworld combat. This is civilized military engagement. He pointed one of his 4 arms at a series of doors along the far wall. Form squads of 5. Mixed species integration is mandatory. Begin. The hall erupted into movement as cadets rushed to form groups. Sarah found herself standing alone as teams formed around her without invitation. Finally, a Zephyrian cadet named Whisper Song drifted over, followed reluctantly by 3 others: Zlixander the Valkyrie, a Thraken named Stonehide, and a nervous quintel called Bubble Thought, whose transparent dome head revealed a floating brain in blue fluid. I suppose we are a squad now, Whisper Song said, her voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Though I confess uncertainty about our varied capabilities. Zlixander's crystal formations shimmered with amusement. Varied indeed. We have a walking fortress, he gestured at Stonehide. A living computer, he indicated Bubble Thought. A flight-capable scout, he nodded to Whisper Song. A precision combatant, he flexed his crystal-sharp arms, and his gaze fell on Sarah. Whatever humans are supposed to contribute. Sarah had spent 3 months on the transport ship reading everything she could about her squad mate species. The Valkyrie were natural engineers and precise fighters, their crystalline bodies allowing them to channel energy weapons with perfect accuracy. The Zephyrians were scouts and pilots, their ability to fly giving them superior battlefield awareness. The Thraken were living tanks, nearly indestructible and capable of incredible strength. The quintel were tactical geniuses, their enhanced brains capable of calculating thousands of variables simultaneously. And humans? According to galactic databases, humans were persistence hunters from a harsh world with no notable physical advantages beyond stubbornness and an unusual tolerance for pain. Attention Squad 47. Sergeant Vextar's voice crackled through their comm units. Report to Simulation Chamber 12. Scenario: hostile boarding action on a civilian transport. Threat level: moderate. Rules of engagement: minimum necessary force. The squad moved toward their assigned chamber, Sarah trailing behind the others. The simulation room was the size of a large spacecraft cargo bay, with holographic projectors creating an environment so realistic that Sarah could smell recycled air and feel the subtle vibration of imaginary engines. Remember, Whisper Song said as they checked their training weapons, this is a civilian rescue scenario. The Academy emphasizes restraint and precision. We are not here to destroy everything in sight. The others murmured agreement, checking their stunners and non-lethal restraint devices. Sarah examined her own equipment, a basic stunner that could incapacitate most species with a single shot, restraint cuffs, and a scanner for identifying threats versus civilians. Simulation beginning in 3, 2, 1 mark. The holographic environment activated around them. They stood in the cramped corridor of a civilian transport, emergency lighting casting red shadows on the walls. Through the speakers came the sounds Sarah's training had taught her to recognize: muffled screams, weapons fire, and the heavy footsteps of armed hostiles. Bubble thought, analysis, Zlixander commanded, naturally taking leadership of the squad. The quintel's brain pulsed rapidly in its dome. Scanning. I detect 17 life signs aboard. 5 appear to be hostile entities based on movement patterns and weapon signatures. 12 civilian signatures clustered in 3 separate locations, likely hiding. Standard rescue formation, Zlixander decided. Stonehide takes point with his armor. Whisper Song provides overwatch from above. Bubble Thought stays center for tactical coordination. I'll handle precision elimination of threats. Human. He paused, looking at Sarah with poorly concealed irritation. Try to stay out of the way, and maybe help with the civilians afterward. They moved forward through the simulated corridor. Stonehide's massive form absorbed several stun blasts from the first group of holographic pirates without even slowing down. His return fire dropped 2 attackers instantly. Whisper Song floated near the ceiling, her enhanced vision spotting a 3rd pirate attempting to flank them. Contact left, she whispered through the comms. Zlixander's precise, crystal spikes channeled energy into a perfect stun shot that dropped the flanker immediately. Sarah followed behind, scanning for additional threats while her squad mates worked with practiced efficiency. They were good, she had to admit. Their advantages made them natural soldiers in ways that humans could never match. But something felt wrong. Sarah's nerves were on fire with an alertness that her squad mates didn't seem to share. Every shadow looked wrong. Every sound carried undertones that made her skin crawl. The smell in the air wasn't quite right for a simple pirate raid. Movement ahead, Bubble Thought announced. 2 hostiles in the main passenger compartment with approximately 8 civilians. Standard hostage situation, Zlixander said confidently. Stonehide, you draw their attention. Whisper Song, aerial positioning for clean shots. I'll handle precise elimination once they're distracted. Simple. They moved into position outside the passenger compartment. Through the partially open door, Sarah could see 2 armed figures holding frightened civilians. Everything about the scenario matched Academy training protocols perfectly. Too perfectly. Sarah's instincts screamed warnings that she couldn't articulate. On Earth, when predators seemed too easy to spot, it usually meant they wanted to be seen. When situations seemed too simple, it usually meant you were walking into an ambush. Wait, she whispered into the comm, something's not right about this. Not right how? Zlixander's crystal formations flickered with annoyance. 2 hostiles, clear sight lines, standard tactical approach. What could possibly be wrong? Sarah couldn't explain the feeling crawling up her spine. It wasn't based on scanner readings or tactical analysis. It was the same instinct that had kept her ancestors alive when saber-toothed cats stalked them through tall grass, when cave bears waited in seemingly empty dens, when other humans set traps disguised as easy prey. The timing is too convenient, she said. They're positioned exactly where we can see them, in exactly the formation our textbooks would expect. Their weapon positioning allows for clean stun shots from 3 different angles. Real pirates wouldn't be this cooperative. This is a training simulation, Stonehide rumbled through the calm, his voice like grinding bedrock. Of course it follows training protocols. That is the point of training. Execute the plan, Zlixander ordered. Human, maintain position and observe how real soldiers handle combat situations. Sarah watched her squad mates move into their assigned positions. Stonehide stepped into the doorway, his massive frame drawing immediate attention from the 2 visible pirates. Whisper Song floated up to ceiling level, her stunner aimed at perfect angles. Zlixander prepared his crystal formations for precision shots. Everything was proceeding exactly according to Academy doctrine. That's when Sarah noticed the 3rd heat signature. Her scanner showed it for just a moment, a faint outline hidden behind what appeared to be solid bulkhead paneling. The shape was wrong for a civilian, too alert, and positioned for ambush. Her scanner tagged it as a false reading for a split second before the signature disappeared entirely. Cloaking technology. Professional grade. Abort. Sarah shouted into the comm. Hidden contact with active camouflage. This is a trap. Negative, Zlixander replied sharply. Maintain radio discipline. We have clear tactical superiority. Executing on my mark in 3. Sarah didn't wait for orders. Every instinct inherited from a million years of human evolution screamed at her to act now or watch her pack die. She dove through the doorway at full speed, her earth-trained muscles propelling her faster than any of her squad mates had expected possible. The hidden pirate's cloaking field shimmered as he raised what Sarah's enhanced peripheral vision identified as a military-grade plasma rifle. Not a stunner, but a weapon designed to kill. He had been waiting for her squad to commit to their safe, Academy-approved positions before opening fire on their exposed flanks. Sarah's tackle sent both of them crashing into a bank of passenger seats. The plasma rifle discharged into the ceiling, melting a hole through 3 deck plates. Her training knife, a simple composite blade that wouldn't register on most weapon scanners, found the gap in his armor at the throat with precision born from thousands of hours of combat drills. In her mind, she pulled the strike at the last second, remembering this was just training. The blade stopped just short of penetration, holding position against the pirate's throat. Yield, she said quietly. The simulation ended with a sharp chime. Sarah found herself lying on top of a very real Academy instructor wearing elaborate costume armor. Around her, her squad mates stared in shock. The plasma rifle was revealed as an advanced holographic projector designed to test cadet reactions to escalating threats. Sergeant Vexstar's voice echoed through the chamber speakers with barely contained fury. Cadet Chun, report to the center of the room immediately. Sarah rolled off the instructor and stood at attention. The man she had tackled was also standing, but Sarah noticed he was breathing heavily and rubbing his throat where her knife had stopped. Explain your actions, Cadet, Sergeant Vexstar demanded as he entered the chamber. I detected an ambush, Sergeant. The tactical situation suggested. You detected nothing. Vexstar's mandibles clacked angrily. This was a standard Academy scenario designed to test basic threat response. The hidden contact was meant to be discovered through proper scanning protocols and addressed with appropriate force escalation. Instead, you launched an unprovoked assault on an Academy instructor. Sarah felt her squad mates' eyes boring into her. Zlixander's crystal formations were practically glowing with embarrassment. Whisper Song's wings had folded tight against her body in distress. Stonehide looked like he wanted to disappear into his shell, and Bubblethought's brain was pulsing rapid calculations of how this would affect their squad's performance ratings. Furthermore, Vexstar continued, your actions demonstrated complete disregard for rules of engagement. This was a training exercise with stunner weapons. You deployed a concealed blade against an instructor in what appears to be lethal intent. I pulled the strike, Sergeant, Sarah said quietly. No injury was inflicted. Pulled the strike? Pulled the strike. Vexstar's forearms gestured wildly. Cadet Chun, this is the Galactic Military Academy, not some barbaric gladiator pit. We do not pull strikes because we do not make lethal attacks during training exercises. The instructor Sarah had tackled stepped forward. Sergeant, if I may. His voice was slightly hoarse. The cadet's threat assessment was actually correct. I was positioned for a simulated ambush using cloaking technology specifically to test advanced threat detection. Her response time was unprecedented. The response was appropriate for a death world, Vextar said with disgust. But this is not Earth, Cadet Chun. Here we have evolved beyond primitive violence. We use intelligence, technology, and measured force. We do not throw ourselves at enemies like wild animals. Sarah kept her expression neutral, but inside she felt a familiar burning. It was the same feeling she'd had when her academy application had been lost 3 times before finally being processed. The same feeling when her transport bunkmate had accidentally contaminated her food with allergens that were harmless to her but would have hospitalized most humans. The same feeling when she'd overheard instructors discussing whether humans were really intelligent enough for modern warfare. Report to my office after evening chow, Cadet Chun, Vextar said finally. We need to discuss whether you possess the temperament for academy training. The simulation chamber emptied slowly, other squads filing out while discussing their own exercises. Sarah's squad mates avoided eye contact as they left. She was alone with her thoughts when Instructor Morrison approached. He was the human liaison to the academy, a grade veteran who had fought in the frontier wars before the current peace. Walk with me, Chun, he said quietly. They moved through the corridors in silence until they reached an observation deck overlooking the asteroid field where Kepler Station orbited. Stars wheeled slowly beyond the transparent aluminum windows. 30 years I've been trying to get humans accepted into the academy, Morrison said finally. 30 years of proving that we belong among civilized species, that we've evolved beyond our primitive origins. Sarah said nothing. And then, cadets like you come along and undo decades of progress in a single training exercise, Morrison continued. Do you understand what you've done today? I prevented my squad from walking into a kill zone, Sarah replied. Morrison turned to face her. You assaulted an instructor with a concealed weapon during a routine training exercise. The Board of Review is going to see this as evidence that humans are too violent, too unpredictable, too dangerous to serve alongside civilized species. Sir, the scenario was specifically designed to test. The scenario was designed to test proper procedure. Morrison's voice rose. Then, he caught himself and lowered it again. Scanning protocols, communication, measured escalation of force. It was not designed to test whether a cadet would try to cut an instructor's throat. Sarah felt something cold settle in her stomach. Will I be expelled, sir? Morrison was quiet for a long moment. I don't know. Maybe. Probably. He ran a hand through his graying hair. Chun, do you know why they call Earth a death world? Because of the hostile environment, sir. Extreme weather, dangerous wildlife, unstable geology, toxic atmosphere in many regions. Wrong, Morrison said. They call it a death world because everything that lives there is designed to kill everything else that lives there, including us, especially us. He pointed toward the asteroid field beyond the window. Every other academy cadet comes from a world where evolution was gentle, where intelligence developed in cooperation with environment, where survival meant adaptation and specialization. And humans, sir? Humans come from a world where survival meant being able to kill anything that tried to kill you first, where cooperation meant forming packs to hunt bigger predators, where intelligence developed not for art or philosophy, but for better ways to track, trap, and destroy threats. Morrison's reflection in the window looked older than his years. The galaxy sees that as primitive, barbaric, a stage of development that civilized species left behind millions of years ago. But it works, sir, Sarah said quietly. My response saved my squad from walking into an ambush. Your response terrified your squad mates and convinced your instructors that humans are too dangerous to trust, Morrison replied. Which reaction do you think matters more for your academy career? Sarah had no answer for that. Report to Sergeant Vextar as ordered, Morrison said finally. Answer his questions honestly. Accept whatever punishment they give you. And try to remember that you're not just representing yourself here. You're representing every human who might want to serve alongside aliens in the future. He left her alone on the observation deck. Sarah stood there for a long time, watching the stars and thinking about home. Earth was a blue-green marble somewhere in the direction of Seoul, 30 light-years away and impossibly distant. A world where hurricanes could level cities, where earthquakes could swallow mountains, where simple bacteria could kill millions. A world where humanity had clawed its way to the top of the food chain through pure stubbornness and an absolute refusal to give up. A death world. For the first time since leaving Earth, Sarah wondered if she was making a mistake trying to fit into the civilized galaxy. Maybe some chasms were too wide to bridge. The disciplinary review board met in a sterile white chamber that reminded Sarah of a medical examination room. 3 Academy officials sat behind a curved desk that seemed designed to make the single chair facing them feel isolated and vulnerable. Sergeant Vextar occupied the center position, his compound eyes reflecting the harsh overhead lighting. To his right sat Commander Yilsandra, a Valkyrie whose crystal formations had been polished to mirror brightness. To his left, Admiral Flux Weaver, a Zephyrian whose gossamer wings remained perfectly still in a way that suggested barely controlled anger. Sarah stood at attention before them, still in her training uniform from the previous day. She had spent the night reviewing Academy regulations, trying to find some precedent or procedure that might justify her actions. She had found nothing. Cadet Shun, Commander Yilsandra began, her voice creating harmonic overtones that made the air shimmer slightly. You have been charged with excessive force during training, assault on Academy personnel, and possession of an undeclared weapon. How do you respond to these charges? Guilty as charged, ma'am, Sarah replied without hesitation. The 3 officials exchanged glances. Admiral Flux Weaver leaned forward, her enormous compound eyes studying Sarah with predatory intensity. No defense, no explanation, no claim of misunderstanding or cultural confusion. No, ma'am. I did what I did for the reasons I did it. The charges are accurate. Sergeant Vextar's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation that Sarah had learned to recognize. Cadet Shun, do you understand that this hearing will determine whether you remain at the Academy or are returned to your homeworld in disgrace? I understand, sir. Then, perhaps you would care to explain your apparent indifference to your future? Sarah had spent most of the night thinking about that question. What did her future look like at the Academy? More exercises where her instincts were wrong for the situation? More squad mates who viewed her as a liability? More instructors who saw her species as a mistake to be corrected? Sir, I joined the Academy to serve alongside the galaxy's finest soldiers. If my actions demonstrate that I am unfit for that service, then the Academy's decision to remove me would be correct. Commander Yilsandra's crystal formations shifted to a deeper blue, indicating surprise. You accept that your actions were inappropriate? I accept that my actions violated Academy protocol, Sarah said carefully. Whether they were inappropriate depends on perspective. Elaborate, Admiral Flux Weaver commanded. Sarah chose her words carefully. Academy protocol assumes that training scenarios are safe, controlled environments where standard procedures will be adequate. My actions were based on the assumption that any scenario realistic enough to properly test combat readiness would include variables not covered by standard procedures. You believe the Academy's training methods are inadequate? Sergeant Vextar's voice carried warning. I believe the Academy's training methods are designed for species who evolved in safe environments, Sarah replied. For species who can afford to assume that threats will be reasonable, proportional, and follow predictable patterns. And humans cannot afford such assumptions? Commander Yilsandra asked. Humans who make such assumptions die, ma'am. On Earth, predators who seem easy to handle are usually setting traps. Situations that appear under control are usually about to spiral into chaos. Environments that feel safe are usually concealing dangers that haven't revealed themselves yet. Admiral Fluxweaver's wings fluttered slightly. Are you suggesting that human paranoia is superior to civilized tactical analysis? I'm suggesting that human paranoia is the reason humans survived long enough to develop civilized tactical analysis, ma'am. The room fell silent except for the subtle hum of life support systems. Sarah could see the 3 officers communicating through micro-expressions and subtle body language that their species used for private conversation. Finally, Sergeant Vextar spoke. Cadet Shun, you will be placed on academic probation pending further evaluation. You will undergo additional cultural sensitivity training and psychological assessment. Any further incidents will result in immediate expulsion. Understood, sir. However, Commander Yilsandra continued. You will also be transferred to advanced combat training effective immediately. Your squad placement will be modified. Sarah blinked. Advanced combat training was normally reserved for third-year cadets who had already mastered basic protocols. Ma'am, I don't understand. Instructor Kreldox specifically requested your transfer, Admiral Fluxweaver explained. He believes your unique perspective might be valuable in more challenging scenarios. Dismissed, Cadet, Sergeant Vextar said. Report to Training Complex Omega at 0800 tomorrow. Do not make us regret this decision. Sarah saluted and left the review chamber with her head spinning. Advanced combat training meant working with the Academy's elite cadets, species who had already proven themselves exceptional even by galactic military standards. It also meant scenarios designed to push the limits of what was considered possible. She found Instructor Morrison waiting in the corridor outside. Congratulations, he said, though his expression suggested he wasn't entirely pleased. You've managed to fail upward in a way I've never seen before. Sir, Instructor Kreldox is a Hydran combat specialist. His species evolved as apex predators on a world that makes most planets look like botanical gardens. He's been pushing for more realistic training scenarios for years. But the Academy administration considers his methods too aggressive for standard cadets. They walked together toward the transit hub that would take Sarah to her new quarters in the advanced training section. Kreldox thinks the galaxy has grown soft, Morrison continued. He believes that centuries of peace have made military training into an elaborate dance that looks impressive but won't prepare cadets for real conflict. He's been waiting for someone who might understand his perspective, and he thinks a human might understand. Morrison stopped walking and turned to face her. Chun, do you know why no human has ever graduated from the Academy before you applied? Because we only achieved interstellar travel 20 years ago, sir? Wrong. Humans have been eligible for Academy admission for 15 years. In that time, exactly 43 humans have applied. 42 of them washed out during basic training because they couldn't adapt to galactic military protocols. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. And the 43rd? You're looking at him, Morrison said grimly. I made it through by learning to suppress every instinct that made me human. I became so good at following galactic protocols that I forgot how to think like a predator. It made me an acceptable officer, but a terrible soldier. They reached the transit platform, where a hover car waited to take Sarah to her new quarters. Morrison placed a hand on her shoulder. Kreldox is offering you a different path, he said quietly. A chance to be both human and a galactic soldier. But it's going to be harder than anything you've faced so far. The scenarios in advanced combat training aren't simulations designed to test procedure. They're war games designed to break cadets who aren't ready for real combat. Sir, are you advising me to accept or decline the transfer? Morrison was quiet for a long moment. I'm advising you to remember that you're not just representing yourself. Every human who comes after you will be judged by what you accomplish or fail to accomplish. If you succeed, you might open doors that have been closed to our species since we joined the galactic community. If you fail, if I fail, I prove that humans are too violent and unpredictable to serve alongside civilized species, Sarah finished. Exactly. Sarah climbed into the hover car and settled into the padded seat. Through the transparent canopy, she could see Kepler Station's vast interior stretching away in all directions. Cadets from dozens of species moved through the corridors below, preparing for classes and training exercises that would shape them into the galaxy's next generation of military leaders. None of them were human. The hover car lifted off smoothly and accelerated toward the advanced training complex. Sarah watched the standard training areas fall away beneath her, replaced by facilities that looked more like fortress installations than academic buildings. The architecture was harder here, designed for function rather than comfort. Her new quarters were twice the size of her previous room, but felt somehow more austere. The walls were bare metal instead of the decorated panels used elsewhere in the academy. The furniture was military standard rather than the ergonomic designs meant to accommodate different species' comfort requirements. A message waited on her room's communication terminal. Cadet Chun, report to Training Complex Omega, Chamber 7, at 0600 tomorrow. Bring only basic gear. Advanced combat scenarios do not accommodate species-specific equipment preferences. Instructor Kreldox. Sarah read the message 3 times, trying to parse what basic gear meant in the context of advanced training. Her standard academy equipment included stunners, scanners, and non-lethal restraint devices. But something about the message's tone suggested that Instructor Kreldox had different ideas about appropriate equipment. She spent the evening reviewing everything she could find about Hydran combat doctrine and Instructor Kreldox specifically. The information was sparse, but what she found was unsettling. Hydrans were ambush predators from a world where the distinction between hunter and prey changed moment by moment. Their military philosophy emphasized adaptability, ruthlessness, and the willingness to escalate force levels faster than opponents could react. According to the files, Kreldox had served in the Frontier Wars as a Special Operations Commander. His unit had been responsible for missions that other species considered too dangerous or morally questionable. After the wars ended, he had been assigned to the Academy over the objections of several member species who considered his methods too aggressive for peacetime training. Sarah arrived at Training Complex Omega 30 minutes early, but she wasn't the first cadet there. A small group had already assembled outside Chamber 7, and Sarah immediately understood why she had been transferred. These weren't normal Academy cadets. The Thraken cadet was larger than any she had seen before, his armor-plated hide scarred from what appeared to be real combat. His name tag read Stonecrusher, and when he moved, the floor vibrated slightly under his weight. Next to him stood a Valkyrie whose crystal formations had been deliberately sharpened to weapon-grade points. Her name was Edgebringer, and the way light refracted through her body suggested she had undergone military enhancement procedures that were technically legal but rarely used in peacetime. A Zephyrian floated nearby, but unlike the graceful, butterfly-like cadets from standard training, this one's wings were reinforced with metal threading, and his flight patterns suggested combat maneuvering rather than aesthetic display. His tag simply read Skyhunter. The fourth member of the group made Sarah's blood run cold. She had never seen a Shadowkin before, but she recognized the species from intelligence briefings. They were natural assassins from a tidally locked world where the Terminator line between day and night created an ecosystem of perfect ambush predators. The cadet's name tag read Voidstep, and Sarah noticed that her eyes had trouble tracking his exact position even when he was standing still. Fresh meat, Stonecrusher rumbled, his voice like grinding bedrock. What Deathworld spawned this one? Earth, Sarah replied, meeting his gaze steadily. What fortress world made you? Stonecrusher's massive head tilted slightly, a gesture that might have been surprise or amusement. Kintar Prime, where the strong survive and the weak become building materials. He gestured toward the others. We are all graduate students here, little Deathworlder. Species that other cadets fear to train alongside. Why? Sarah asked. Because, Edgebringer said, her crystal voice creating harmonic frequencies that made Sarah's teeth ache. We do not pretend that war is a civilized endeavor. The chamber door opened with a pneumatic hiss, and Instructor Kreldox emerged. Sarah's first impression was that someone had taken the concept of a nightmare and given it military rank. The Hydran stood 9 feet tall on 4 legs that ended in retractable claws. His upper body was humanoid, but covered in scales that shifted color to match his surroundings. For arms ended in hands that could apparently function as either manipulative appendages or cutting weapons. Most unsettling were his eyes. They were compound like an insect's, but large enough to suggest sapience, and they tracked movement with predatory focus that made Sarah's spine crawl. Cadets, Kreldox said, his voice a sibilant whisper that somehow carried perfect authority. Enter. The chamber beyond was not like any training room Sarah had seen before. Instead of smooth walls and holographic projectors, it looked like a bombed-out city block. Real rubble, real smoke, real shadows that could conceal real threats. The air smelled of cordite and fear. Today you will learn the first principle of advanced combat, Kreldox announced. There is no such thing as a fair fight. He gestured toward a table covered with weapons that Sarah recognized from intelligence manuals, but had never seen in person. Military-grade plasma rifles, monomolecular blades, gravity distortion grenades, and devices she couldn't immediately identify. Standard Academy training uses stunners and restraint devices because it assumes your opponents will be reasonable beings who can be subdued and processed according to civilized law, Kreldox continued. This assumption will get you killed. He picked up a plasma rifle and checked its charge indicator. In real combat, your opponents will use any advantage available to achieve victory. They will not limit themselves to non-lethal weapons. They will not follow rules of engagement. They will not show mercy to cadets who are unprepared for actual warfare. Sarah felt her heart rate increase as understanding dawned. This wasn't a training exercise. This was combat preparation for scenarios where Academy protocols would be inadequate. Your mission today is simple, Kreldox said. There are 5 enemy combatants concealed in this environment. Find them and neutralize them before they neutralize you. Use any methods and equipment you deem appropriate. Sir, Skyhunter's voice carried the musical quality of his species. Are we authorized to use lethal force? Kreldox's color-shifting hide rippled with what might have been amusement. You are authorized to survive. Your opponents are programmed to kill you if given the opportunity. I suggest you respond accordingly. He moved toward the chamber exit, then paused. One additional note. Standard Academy doctrine suggests that you form teams and coordinate your efforts. My experience suggests that in real combat, attempts at coordination often result in coordinated death. Choose your approach accordingly. The door sealed behind him with the finality of a tomb closing. The 5 cadets stood in the artificial ruins, each processing the implications of their situation. This wasn't a test of procedure or protocol. It was a test of whether they could transition from Academy students to soldiers who might actually survive real combat. Stonecrusher was the first to move, selecting a graviton cannon that most species would need power assistance to lift. I will draw their attention. The rest of you use the distraction. Negative, Edgebringer said, her crystal formations already beginning to channel energy. Coordinated tactics make us predictable. We move independently. 5 enemies, 5 of us, Voidstep said, his voice seeming to come from several directions at once. Mathematics suggests individual engagement. Skyhunter's wings spread to full extension as he tested the chamber's air currents. I will take the high ground. The rest of you can fight over the scraps. They all turned to look at Sarah, waiting for her tactical input. She realized they expected her to claim a specific role in their formation, to negotiate her place in the group's hierarchy. Instead, she picked up a monomolecular blade and a scanner, checking both devices quickly before securing them to her utility harness. I'm going hunting, she said simply. Hunting what? Stonecrusher asked. Sarah smiled, and for the first time since arriving at the academy, the expression felt natural on her face. Everything that's hunting us. She disappeared into the artificial ruins without another word, leaving her fellow cadets to choose their own approaches to survival. Behind her, she could hear them beginning to coordinate their attacks, discussing optimal positioning and fields of fire. Sarah moved through the rubble like her ancestors had moved through tall grass on the African savanna. Every shadow was a potential hiding place. Every sound was a possible threat indicator. Every breath of air carried scents that might reveal the presence of predators. She was hunting again, and, for the first time since leaving Earth, she felt completely at home. Sarah moved through the ruins like a ghost, her enhanced senses picking up details that her academy training had never taught her to notice. The artificial smoke carried trace chemicals that suggested the composition of the explosive devices used to create this environment. The rubble patterns told stories about blast directions and structural weak points. Even the lighting felt wrong in ways that suggested deliberate manipulation to create blind spots and killing fields. This wasn't just a training chamber. It was a hunting ground designed by a predator who understood exactly how prey animals would behave when trapped. She found the first enemy 15 minutes after separating from her squad mates. The combat android was positioned in what Academy doctrine would identify as an excellent overwatch position: elevated, good sight lines, multiple escape routes. According to standard tactical analysis, it should have been nearly impossible to approach without detection. But Academy doctrine assumed that enemies would position themselves to fight other Academy-trained opponents. It didn't account for predators who had learned to approach prey that was actively trying not to be approached. Sarah spent 20 minutes circling the android's position, mapping its sensor patterns and movement cycles. It was clearly programmed with advanced tactical algorithms, but those algorithms were based on civilized combat doctrine. They assumed opponents would advance along logical routes, use available cover efficiently, and attempt to engage from positions of tactical advantage. Sarah did none of those things. Instead, she waited until the android's scanning pattern created a 3-second blind spot, then closed the distance in a sprint that would have impressed Olympic coaches on Earth. Her monomolecular blade found the android's primary power coupling before its threat detection systems could register her presence. One down. 4 to go? The sound of plasma fire echoed through the chamber from the direction her squad mates had gone. She could hear Stonecrusher's graviton cannon charging and Edgebringer's crystal formations singing with channeled energy. They were fighting, which meant they had found enemies. Or the enemies had found them. Sarah moved toward the sound of combat, but not in a straight line. Her route took her through areas that would be ignored by anyone focused on the obvious battle. She moved through spaces too small for most species to navigate, over terrain that would be unstable for heavier beings, and through shadows that most eyes couldn't penetrate. She found Skyhunter first. The Zephyrian was pinned down behind a collapsed wall, his reinforced wings folded tight against his body to avoid presenting a target. 2 combat androids had him in a crossfire, their plasma weapons systematically destroying his cover. His position was rapidly becoming untenable. According to Academy doctrine, Sarah should have found a position where she could provide supporting fire, then coordinated with Skyhunter to execute a tactical withdrawal. The proper procedure would have involved careful positioning, communication protocols, and measured escalation of force. Sarah climbed straight up the wall behind the androids instead. Her enhanced muscles, developed under Earth's crushing gravity, allowed her to scale the rubble pile in seconds. The androids' tactical programming hadn't considered the possibility of a vertical approach from their rear arc. Their sensors were focused on Skyhunter's position and potential flanking routes that ground-based opponents might use. Sarah dropped onto the first android from above, her monomolecular blade severing its head assembly before its balance systems could compensate for the unexpected impact. She rolled away from the falling machine and came up running toward the second android, which was still processing the destruction of its partner. The android turned toward her, plasma rifle tracking to acquire a new target. At this range, even a partial hit would be fatal. Sarah didn't try to dodge the shot. Instead, she threw herself directly at the weapon's muzzle. Her timing was perfect. The plasma bolt discharged just as her body reached the weapon, but her momentum carried her inside the android's minimum engagement range. At contact distance, its rifle was useless, and its secondary weapons systems couldn't target something that was literally on top of it. Her blade found the android's cognitive matrix through its optical sensor housing. The machine collapsed beneath her, sparking and twitching as its systems failed. Skyhunter stared at her with what she had learned to recognize as Zephyrian shock. His species-enhanced eyes had tracked her entire assault, and his expression suggested he couldn't quite believe what he had witnessed. "How did you move that fast?" he asked. "Gravity differential," Sarah replied, helping him to his feet. "Earth normal is about 3 times galactic standard. We build muscle mass accordingly." And the tactical approach. Sarah considered how to explain hunting instincts to a species that had evolved as graceful aerial dancers. "Your enemies were programmed to fight soldiers." "I'm not a soldier." "Then what are you?" Before Sarah could answer, the sound of graviton cannon fire stopped abruptly. In the sudden silence that followed, she could hear Edgebringer's crystal formations still singing, but the harmonic was wrong. Instead of the precise frequencies of channeled energy weapons, she was hearing the discordant notes of crystal under stress. "Edgebringer's in trouble," Skyhunter said. "Stonecrusher's weapon has gone silent." Sarah was already moving toward the sound. "Can you fly reconnaissance?" "In this environment, too much rubble for safe maneuvering. And if there are more androids with plasma weapons, your choice," Sarah called back as she disappeared into the ruins. "But if you want your squad mates alive, I could use someone watching my back." She heard the whisper of wings behind her as Skyhunter took to the air despite the risks. Sarah found Stonecrusher's body in what had once been a building lobby. The massive Thraken was still alive, but barely. His natural armor had absorbed most of the damage from multiple plasma hits, but his graviton cannon had been destroyed, and one of his arms was badly damaged. He was pinned under debris that would have taken a construction crew to move. 20 meters away, Edgebringer was engaged in single combat with what appeared to be the most advanced android Sarah had seen yet. This one moved with fluid grace that suggested sophisticated combat programming, and its weapons were integrated into its frame rather than carried as separate devices. Edgebringer's crystal formations were singing defensive harmonics, but Sarah could see stress fractures beginning to appear in several key points. The android was winning. 2 more androids approaching from the east corridor. Skyhunter's voice crackled through their comm units from somewhere above. You have maybe 3 minutes before they arrive. Sarah analyzed the tactical situation with the clarity that comes from being absolutely certain you're about to die if you make the wrong choice. Edgebringer was holding the advanced android's attention, but she couldn't maintain her defense much longer. Stonecrusher was out of action, but still alive. 2 more enemies were approaching. By Academy standards, this was a scenario that called for tactical withdrawal and regrouping. The smart move would be to fall back, develop a new plan, and return with better positioning and coordination. Sarah had never been accused of being smart. Instead, she did something that would have horrified her Academy instructors, but made perfect sense to someone whose species had survived by hunting megafauna with pointed sticks. She charged directly at the most dangerous enemy with nothing but a knife and absolute commitment to violence. The advanced android detected her approach when she was still 15 meters away. Its tactical programming immediately classified her as a secondary threat, dangerous enough to acknowledge, but less important than the primary combatant who was already engaging it with energy weapons. It was the last mistake the android would ever make. Sarah covered the 15 meters in just under 2 seconds, her Earth-trained muscles propelling her faster than the android's threat assessment protocols had calculated possible. She hit the machine's midsection with an impact that would have shattered the ribs of most organic beings, driving her monomolecular blade through its central processing, housing with enough force to punch through the back armor plating. The android's integrated weapons fired reflexively as its systems failed, but Sarah was already rolling away from the collapsing machine. Edgebringer's crystal formations sang a brief note of gratitude before falling silent as she collapsed from exhaustion. East Corridor. Skyhunter's warning came just as the 2 remaining androids rounded the corner. They were moving in perfect coordination, their weapons already tracking toward what their sensors identified as the primary threats in the chamber. Sarah was not among their priority targets. The androids had been programmed with tactical algorithms based on civilized warfare. Their threat assessment prioritized opponents with ranged weapons, elevated positions, and cover advantages. They focused their attention on Skyhunter's aerial position and Stonecrusher's massive form. They ignored the small organic being with primitive weapons who was covered in the sparking remains of their squad mate. Sarah used their distraction to close the distance again, but this time, she didn't attack directly. Instead, she moved to a position where the 2 androids were between her and her squad mates, then began making noise. Lots of noise. She kicked debris, scraped her blade against metal surfaces, and generally acted like someone who was panicking and had lost all tactical discipline. The android's audio sensors picked up the commotion and automatically adjusted their positioning to maintain sight lines on all detected threats, which meant they had to turn their backs on Skyhunter. The Zephyrian's reinforced wings weren't just for flight. They were also weapons, and when he dove from above with his full body weight behind them, the sharpened wing edges cut through the first android's torso like monomolecular scissors. The second android turned toward this new threat, which put its back to Sarah. Her blade found its power coupling before it could complete its targeting solution. Silence fell over the chamber except for the gentle settling sounds of debris and the quiet hum of failing electronic systems. Exercise complete. Instructor Kreldox's voice announced through hidden speakers. All threats neutralized. Casualties, 0. Time elapsed, 43 minutes, 16 seconds. Emergency lights activated throughout the chamber, revealing medical teams moving towards Stonecrusher's position. The Thraken's injuries were serious, but not life-threatening, and Sarah watched with relief as the medics began stabilizing his condition. Kreldox emerged from a concealed observation booth, his color-shifting hide cycling through patterns that suggested deep satisfaction. He approached Sarah's position with the fluid grace of a natural predator. "Cadet Chun," he said, his sibilant voice carrying harmonics she was beginning to recognize as approval. "Your tactical approach was unconventional." "Sir, I improvised based on the situation." "Indeed. Most interesting improvisation." He gestured toward the scattered remains of the combat androids. These units were programmed with the tactical databases of every major galactic military force. They could counter any standard approach taught in academy courses. Kreldox's compound eyes fixed on Sarah with predatory intensity. "Yet you defeated them using methods that are not taught in any academy course. Methods that are not documented in any military database. Methods that my species developed before we knew there were other military databases, sir." "Precisely." Kreldox moved to examine the first android Sarah had destroyed, noting the precise placement of her blade strike. "Tell me, Cadet Chun, what did you see when you looked at these opponents?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "I saw machines programmed to fight soldiers, sir. Machines that expected their opponents to behave according to established tactical doctrine." "And how did you behave?" "Like a predator hunting prey, sir." Kreldox's hide shifted to a pattern that Sarah was learning to associate with what might be laughter in his species. "Indeed. Like an apex predator from a world where tactical doctrine means knowing 50 different ways to kill something that is trying to kill you first." He turned to address the other cadets, who were receiving medical attention and equipment checks from the emergency teams. "Observe, students. This is what true combat effectiveness looks like. Not adherence to protocol. Not advanced technology. Not superior physical capabilities." His gaze returned to Sarah. "But the willingness to be more violent, more ruthlessly committed to survival, and more dangerous than your opponents expect you to be." Skyhunter approached, his reinforced wings folded respectfully. "Instructor Kreldox, I must ask, is this the standard for advanced combat training? Are all scenarios designed to require such methods?" "No, Cadet Skyhunter," Kreldox replied. "This scenario was specifically designed to test whether any of you possess the mindset necessary for real combat. Most galactic military academies train officers to command soldiers. We are attempting something different here." "Which is, sir?" Kreldox's compound eyes swept across all the cadets present. "We are training soldiers who might need to fight without the support of galactic civilization. Soldiers who might face opponents that do not follow galactic rules of warfare. Soldiers who might need to survive in situations where protocol and procedure will not be sufficient." Edgebringer had recovered enough to join the conversation, her crystal formations now repaired and glowing with renewed energy. "Sir, are you suggesting that the galaxy's current military doctrine is inadequate?" "I am suggesting," Kreldox said carefully, "that the galaxy has enjoyed unprecedented peace for several centuries. Peace that has allowed military training to become refined, civilized, safe." He gestured toward the ruined chamber around them. "But peace does not last forever. And when it ends, those who are prepared only for civilized warfare tend to die very quickly." Stonecrusher's voice rumbled from the medical station where teams were treating his injuries. "Instructor, what kind of threats are we being prepared for? Who would fight using methods that Academy doctrine cannot counter?" Kreldox was quiet for a long moment, his color-shifting hide cycling through patterns that suggested deep thought. "Pirates who have never heard of the Geneva Accords," he said finally. "Hostile species from outside galactic space who do not recognize our rules of engagement. Rogue elements within our own civilization who have decided that civilized behavior is a luxury they can no longer afford." His gaze fixed on Sarah again. "Or perhaps species like humanity, who have spent their entire evolutionary history learning that survival requires being willing to do whatever is necessary to ensure that they are the ones who go home alive." "Sir," Sarah said carefully, "are you suggesting that humans are naturally more suited for this type of combat?" "I am suggesting," Kreldox replied, "that humans are the only species in the Academy who instinctively understand that the purpose of combat is not to follow rules. It is to survive." He began moving toward the chamber exit, then paused. "Your next exercise is tomorrow at 0600. The scenario will be more challenging. I suggest you all get adequate rest. Sir, Skyhunter called after him. What will tomorrow's scenario involve? Kreldox's hide rippled with what was definitely amusement this time. Tomorrow, cadets, you will learn what it means to fight opponents who are also trained to ignore civilized rules of engagement. The chamber door sealed behind him, leaving the 5 cadets alone with the debris of their first real combat exercise. Sarah looked around at her squad mates, Stonecrusher being treated for injuries that would have killed most beings, Edgebringer whose crystal formations now showed stress patterns from channeling emergency power levels, Skyhunter whose reinforced wings were marked with scoring from near-miss plasma bolts, and Voidstep who had emerged from the exercise without apparent injury but whose silence suggested he had seen things that disturbed even his assassin's sensibilities. So, Edgebringer said finally, her crystal voice creating subdued harmonics. This is what real military training looks like. No, Sarah said quietly. This is what preparation for war looks like. And the difference? Stonecrusher asked. Sarah thought about Earth, about humanity's long climb from prey to predator, about the instincts that had kept her species alive when everything else on their world was trying to kill them. Military training assumes you'll have support, she said. War preparation assumes you'll have nothing but your willingness to do whatever it takes to survive. She looked at each of her squad mates in turn. The question is, are you willing? The silence that followed was filled with the weight of understanding. They were no longer academy cadets learning to follow protocols. They were soldiers being prepared for scenarios where protocol would not be enough. Outside the training chamber, the civilized galaxy continued its peaceful existence, unaware that on a small station orbiting an unremarkable asteroid, 5 beings from different worlds were learning to think like predators. And one of them was teaching the others what it truly meant to come from a death world. In her quarters that night, Sarah received a message from Instructor Morrison. Chun, heard about your performance today. Kreldox has requested that you be assigned permanently to his advanced program. This is unprecedented for a first-year cadet. Also unprecedented, 3 different member species have filed formal complaints about human involvement in uncontrolled combat scenarios. The Academy Board is split between commending you and restricting human participation in future exercises. Whatever you do next, remember that you're not just representing yourself. You're proving whether humans belong in the galactic military. No pressure. Morrison. Sarah deleted the message and began preparing for tomorrow's exercise. She had spent her life being told that humans were too violent, too primitive, too dangerous for civilized company. But here, in this place where survival mattered more than civilized behavior, those qualities were becoming advantages. For the first time since leaving Earth, Sarah began to understand what her species might contribute to the galaxy. And, more importantly, she began to understand what the galaxy might need from her species when the peace inevitably ended and the real fighting began.